No matter my opinion on The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi as films, I always try and figure out an angle for me to enjoy the Star Wars films with. From the incredible detail within the now non-canon lore that's dubbed Legends, to the layered eye for detail within the numerous biomes and planets we explore throughout the Skywalker saga, you cannot argue that Lucasfilm hasn't provided us with a lot of content to consume. And with that come theories. Lots and lots of theories. So many that seem so bogus and far-fetched, and some that seem like they should be inducted straight into the canon. Now, my interest peaked at the thought of a nice balance of the two. A theory that is rather ridiculous at first thought, but also seems grounded in the rather fantastical universe that is the Star Wars canon. Now don't worry, this video isn't all about some radical Rise of Skywalker theory, as you can tell by the title, so bear with me. After looking back at The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and reading into some imagery a little more, I've grown to casually buy into the theory that Rey is evil. Well, not necessarily straight up evil, but she's not who she says she is. Rey is in fact a sleeper agent working under the First Order, and has been sent to Jakku. This makes the sequel trilogy so far a lot more interesting to me, as it negates the argument for her being some dull Mary Sue character, but rather she's an experienced spy who has a lot of technical know-how, from being able to repair the Millennium Falcon almost without breaking a sweat, to being able to use blasters accurately without visible training. It all adds up to me this way. She's not actually an orphan on Jakku, she's just made up this backstory as her cover, and it works. I'll refer to you a video by What is Anti-Logic in the description, as he discusses this theory in a lot more detail. Anyway, in the theory, Rey is a Knight of Ren, and has previously had training by Snoke, which is where I start to fall off a little bit, more so because of the promotional material of The Rise of Skywalker, and its inclusion of Sheev, otherwise known as Darth Sidious. Now, we all saw him die by the hands of Darth Vader in The Return of the Jedi, right? He fell down into an abyss, and then the Death Star exploded. He's got to be dead. Well, it's extremely likely, although I'd love to see him back in action, and not just as a Sith ghost or hologram. This is where video games come into play. All Star Wars games, at least pre-Disney deal, were retconned as non-canon, and put into the category of Legends. However, that doesn't mean that pieces of them might not find their way back into other Star Wars media. The involvement of Sidious might uncover the story behind Rey, and recently I saw an article detailing a theory of how she could be a clone. A clone of who? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it could be utilising Skywalker DNA. Sidious did have access to Anakin's DNA and would have kept samples after the operation that turned him from man to machine. He also constantly expressed disappointment in Vader being reduced to his cyborg state, and being unable to tap into certain aspects of the dark side of the Force as a result. This also leads to numerous replacements being sought out by Sidious, even going so far as to trying to draw Luke, his son, to the dark side of the Force and rule as his apprentice. Perhaps Sidious was working on trying to create some almost genetic clone of Anakin in some way, but was never perfectly successful until the later stages, by the nearing of his departure from the series. This would tie in with the Force Unleashed 2 game, where Darth Vader attempts to clone his apprentice, Starkiller, from the previous game. The player plays as an escaped clone, but at the very end, in a duel with Vader, if the player decides to finish him off, the perfect clone reveals himself, killing the player and ending the game. The bad ending. This perfect clone has been trained in all of the arts of the Sith, and has been pre-programmed to a life of stealth and agency when Vader requires his assistance. With the real Starkiller from the first game's links into the Rebellion, it was Vader's intention to use this perfect clone as a stealth agent to tear down all who oppose the Empire from the inside out. Obvious parallels can be seen within Rey's actions, if you're like me and buy into the theory. The way her actions differ to when she's around Resistance members to when she's around Snoke and Kylo. How she dives straight towards the darkness in the place of power on Luke's island in Act 0. And then there's the costume design, rhyming with the leads of the past two trilogies in Luke and Anakin, showing her progression of her transformation from undercover Resistance fighter to, well, who knows, Sidious's little project? Snoke's secret apprentice? Well, obviously this is all theoretical, but I find it adding further intrigue to the sequel story when rewatching the Disney films. Now, I've always enjoyed the idea of converging media for the profit of immersion, but seeing old and now non-canon plotlines from games potentially make an appearance in one of the biggest films of all time, and potentially one of the biggest Star Wars films, certainly excites me. So I wanted to look at some other potential routes that Lucasfilm could take, resurrecting some of the old brilliant storylines that we played through all those years ago. Obviously, there are numerous narrative hooks within BioWare and Obsidian Entertainment's Knights of the Old Republic games. However, I'd honestly prefer to see them as a whole being utilised in some way, whether in a new game, movie, or Disney Plus show, and I'm certainly not alone with this optimistic thought process. Straight off the bat, I'd like to discuss the thing that I'm most looking forward to, the Kenobi Disney Plus show. With the return of fellow Scot, Ewan McGregor, reprising his role as my favourite Star Wars character, Obi-Wan Kenobi, I certainly hope the creative team do the character justice, showing the events after Kenobi dropping baby Luke off with Owen and Beru. I instantly think of Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast when thinking of potential plot threads to be reworked. Much like the playable character Kyle Katarn, Kenobi is a balanced Jedi. He's much more of a grey Jedi compared to most of the others on the Jedi Council, with obvious influences from his master, Qui-Gon Jinn. Katarn exhales his Force abilities away after reaching a tempting point to turn to the dark side, and decides a more honest life is the best path for him, similarly to Kenobi settling down on Tatooine to look over Luke. However, as we see in A New Hope, Kenobi has not completely lost his connection to the Force, which works well with Outcast, as Katarn leaps back into the ways of the Force after losing a loved one and almost his own life to a Sith, seeking revenge. After his little cameo in Solo, I can see Maul making an appearance with his goons, tracking down the man who almost ended his life, and once Kenobi senses the disturbance that Maul may be causing to nearby settlers and attempts to locate him, he'll return to the ways of the Force and provide a balance. I'd also like to make the point of telling you that in Jedi Outcast we witness a Sith cloning facility which had aimed to dominate the galaxy with an army of perfect Sith. There are numerous instances of this happening throughout Star Wars Legends, so the original Rey theory might have some merit in the Star Wars universe. Jon Favreau's highly anticipated Mandalorian Disney Plus show finally got a trailer, and we got to see further into the aesthetic of the show. And I feel that no other Star Wars game plot could be brought into the writer's room before Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I go straight to this game for the obvious reasons, but also because it deals with a similar sorrowful tone of the tragedy and danger that comes from bounty hunting in the galaxy. Bounty Hunter explores Jango Fett's work in the run-up to the events present in Attack of the Clones. He's not a good guy, he's not necessarily evil either, he's a simple man trying to make his way through the universe. He's in it for the money. Perhaps the Mandalorian, played by Pedro Pascal, could be faced with a rival bounty hunter, much like Jango's rival in the game, Montrose, both of which could be put head to head with a specific task or high value bounty. He could potentially have an apprentice in the later end of the season, or later in the show's run, much like Jango did with the Zam Wesell, showcasing a new dynamic to someone considered to be a Lone Ranger type. New threats from some of the big bads seen in the series that can't be dealt without the assistance of an ally, force an uneasy alliance that could become a very tight relationship, leading to a love interest or even a protege role. In the end, and during Attack of the Clones, Jango had to kill now close friend Zam, in an attempt to keep the secret about the mysterious clone army. This could present the Mandalorian writer's room with the new protege role or Pascal with some extremely tough decisions in later seasons, maybe even having to kill the other for the greater good. Or bad. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the mysterious Cassian Andor Disney Plus show. We don't seem to know too much about the show, but by the character's appearance in Rogue One, played by Diego Luna, we can tell that he's certainly a rebellious and ruthless man, willing to do anything to save his own skin while also sticking it to the Empire. Although never released, Star Wars 1313 comes to mind when talking about the tone of the Cassian series. 1313 was originally a mature and gritty bounty hunting experience that eased into a more gritty action-adventure game exploring the underbelly of Coruscant. I can see this Cassian show taking a more foot-on-the-ground route, with the showcasing of the rebellion's actions and utilisation of guerrilla warfare. Much like the game, I expect an emphasis on fast-paced, gadget and weapon-based combat, with handy infiltration tools being used to disrupt the Empire in any way possible. Perhaps even having Cassian taking hits on Imperial officers, or taking high-paying jobs to practice some espionage, gathering intel, or destroying crucial buildings of the Empire. I'd love to talk more about Star Wars video games and how they could be reworked into canon under Disney's management, and there are still loads of stories to discuss, from Republic Commando to Battlefront 2. Did I leave out your favourite Star Wars game story, and how could you see that being brought into the canon? Tell me your ideas in the comment section below. My name is Andrew or Stalli111, make sure to drop a like, drop a comment and subscribe if you've not done so already. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.